will come in handy during our breakout sessions. Until then, we ask you to be mindful of that. And if you have any questions, we encourage you for now to type them into the chat. And again, last reminder, if your name is Jess Rudnick on the Zoom link, or your Zoom name is showing up as Jess Rudnick, you might not think you need to check, but double check. Please change that so that we can sort you into the breakout rooms. We have like 10 Jesses right now, so apologies. I also want to use this time, speaking of Jess, I want to use this time to thank our planning committee. So we have Lindsay Correa from the Department of Water Resources, Pam Riddlemar from UC Davis, Steve Golderson from the Delta Stewardship Council and Interagency Ecological Program, Ajay Singh from Cal State University of Sacramento, and Jessica Rudnick from California Sea Grant and the Delta Stewardship Council, as well as Jill Harris and Beck Berger, who you'll hear from soon, also from the Delta Stewardship Council. So big thank you also to all of our note takers and facilitators who you will meet later. Next slide, please. Just some quick housekeeping. If you would like to join the conversation online, we encourage you to use the hashtag AIR Training 2022 and AIR Workshop 2022. And you can tweet or comment or retweet, and we want to hear your thoughts. And you can also find more information about this workshop and the training and about the community of practice in general on our website, which is on the council's website. Next slide. As I mentioned before, today's workshop is the second of a two-part event. So last Friday, we hosted a training that focused on what social science can offer to natural resource management, with a keynote and multiple case studies and some live polling questions about the status of integrating social science and doing interdisciplinary work in the Delta. Today's workshop is about diving into doing interdisciplinary work and building relationships across disciplines. Before we jump into today's workshop, we're going to first have Beck share some of the outcomes of the training last week, and take it away, Beck.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello and welcome. I'm Beck Barger, the Manager of Public Participation here at the Delta Stewardship Council. And I want to thank each of our presenters from last week's training for the fantastic job that they did in building up the social science knowledge platform and the understanding of how interdisciplinary work adds value to any project. Dr. Edie McDonald brought us the Social Science 101. Case studies were featured by Dr. Robin Wilson, Dr. Jessica Bolson, and Dr. Denise Martinez to illuminate the value social scientists bring to a variety of projects and inspire us for what is possible through interdisciplinary research. As a reminder, if you weren't able to attend the training, we do have the recording posted on the Delta Stewardship Council YouTube channel. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. Okay, so who showed up to this fabulous training? As you can see on the pie chart, out of the 86 attendees, 64% identified as natural biophysical scientists, 34% identified as interdisciplinary, 21% as social scientists. So interdisciplinary can convey a lot of things, right? But for the purposes of this training and this workshop, we are emphasizing the social and ecological collaboration. And for those of you doing quick math, yes, these numbers add to 123%. But this is because we wanted people to be allowed to have multiple categories to best describe their expertise. And we also wanted to capture the mindset of the attendees. So we ran a couple of polls during the training as well. One interesting note, about half of the attendees had done interdisciplinary projects before, and 33% had worked on them within the Delta. Next slide, please. Oh, you're ahead. That's okay. Now next slide. There we go. So we asked them to identify barriers to interdisciplinary work in the Delta, and the graph contains the hurdles most frequently identified by the attendees, and they could select multiple barriers here too. So 77% identified a lack of understanding of how to do interdisciplinary work. 49% identified a lack of opportunities for collaboration, and 48% identified lack of funding and incentive. Next slide, please. So when we asked the corresponding question of, well, what's needed to facilitate more interdisciplinary work in the Delta, the answers were not surprising, right? There's a strong correlation between the perceived barriers, lack of understanding, funding, and opportunity, and the perceived solutions. So 68% said training, 66% funding, 57% collaborative work opportunities. Next slide. And we wanted to dig a little deeper. So we asked short answer questions too, like what are the perceptions of interdisciplinary work? And some of the benefits that were identified were it's necessary to understand the wicked problems. And those are the ones that have changing or contradictory requirements, right? Some said the process is more difficult, but also more rewarding. It's essential for realistic approaches to resource management. Attendees also highlighted the challenges to doing this work, such as differing vocabularies, methods, and styles. Interdisciplinary work is a non-traditional and not historically valued, right? Those are definitely hurdles. There's also a need for social science to be recognized as hard science. And finally, we heard from attendees also that contrary to the understanding of many, social science is not outreach and education, or simply providing more information to encourage change. In fact, if you had the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Edie McDonald's presentation last week, she references this quandary, and she explains that through years and years of psychological research, we've learned that that those with the most knowledge can take the least action, and this is called learned helplessness. And those with the highest environmental attitudes can actually be doing the most damage, and that's called optimism bias. Next slide, please. So we also asked, what are some of the Delta challenges, or some Delta challenges that could benefit from interdisciplinary approaches? And we got a lot of responses saying everything. And while I personally hold that to be true, some of the main topics that came up again and again in the short answers were land use management, water quality issues, organizational challenges, and restoration projects. And as you go into your breakout rooms later today, feel free to organize your thoughts loosely around these topics. We also had attendees compile a short list of examples of interdisciplinary projects. And on this slide, you'll see some of them listed, the ones that were most common. And if you're familiar with these projects, go ahead and let them inspire your thought process while you're building your conceptual models today. Who are the stakeholders? What were the barriers to progress? And what were the multi-benefit solutions? And now that I've refreshed you on where we've been, I'm going to pass it back to Rachel, and she's going to let you know where you're headed.
Next slide, please. Thank you so much for that overview, Beck. So we look forward to continuing the conversation that was started at last week's training at today's workshop. So just to give you all a little orientation to today's agenda, we are shortly after this overview, we're going to hear from representatives from some of the collaborative groups that are working on science in the Delta. They're going to present their roles and why they're supporting the integration or interdisciplinary activities. And following that, we will then sort ourselves into the breakout rooms. So thank you all for registering. We've organized everybody to the best of our abilities based on preferences. And we're going to have 8 concurrent breakout sessions. That's going to be the bulk of the time today. Once we get back from the breakout sessions, we're going to hear how that went. And we'll have a report out from each of the groups and a bit of a facilitated discussion before we hear from Henry DeBay, the Deputy Executive Officer for Science at the Delta Stewardship Council, for next steps and our closing remarks. And just a friendly reminder that for those of you who are local to the Sacramento area, we do have a in-person networking opportunity at Drake's The Barn in West Sacramento. Next slide, please. So I just want to quickly cover the goals of today's workshop more specifically. The first is to facilitate confronting and overcoming barriers to doing interdisciplinary research, many of those barriers that Beck just mentioned, and working to continue to integrate social and biophysical sciences to inform Delta management by giving folks the opportunity to talk through a topic with an interdisciplinary team. 2, to foster relationships between members of the Bay Delta social science community of practice and members of the Delta science community. allowing for folks to meet one another both virtually or possibly in person for those who are local. And third, to create a space for the development of interdisciplinary teams or projects that tackle issues in the Delta moving forward after this event. And before we head into the breakout sessions, we want to talk more about the collaborative groups that are currently already doing work here in the Bay Delta as an opportunity to familiarize some of our Bay Delta social science community practice members who are less familiar with the existing system. Next slide, please. The Delta science and management landscape, as many of us know, is very complex. And in addition to the many individual agencies and entities that manage the Delta, there are also a variety of collaborative science forums where many entities can come together to collaborate and coordinate. A table explaining many of these groups was provided to workshop registrants earlier this week. And as you can see from the image here on the right, very few social scientists are currently involved in these collaborative groups. Last year, when we asked about 70 social scientists and members of our community of practice if they participated in any Delta science venues, an overwhelming majority, represented here in the red, said that they never had or only participate a handful, only a handful participate either intermittently or regularly. So this is an area of opportunity. And we hope that this workshop will be that opportunity to spark relationships and enhance opportunities for social scientists to integrate and participate more frequently in the Delta science community. Next slide, please. Luckily, though, we're not alone in our desire to better integrate social science and promote interdisciplinary work in the Delta. And I just want to add a quick disclaimer when we refer to, at least for the purposes of this workshop, as we're talking about interdisciplinary work, we're really emphasizing work that spans across the biophysical and social sciences. There's often a lot of interdisciplinary work that can occur within the biophysical sciences, but we're really trying to emphasize that piece that incorporates the social science disciplines. So just that one little disclaimer. But today, again, we're not alone in our desire to better integrate social sciences and promote interdisciplinary work. So today we're going to hear from representatives from 4 different groups working in the Delta about what they do and why they support more interdisciplinary research. So before we get started, I'm just going to add one more reminder. If your name is Jess Rudnick on your screen, to please, perfect example, to please change your name. But we're going to ask first if you have an initial question. Please type those into the chat right now. As we facilitate this discussion, we'll start with those that are in the chat, but we do have the opportunity to have folks provide their questions verbally. But if I see that there's a question right now, if you wouldn't mind typing that into the chat, that would be great. So we're going to kick off these presentations. And again, we're going to go through all 4 and then save time for kind of a panel discussion at the end. And again, please type your questions that you have into the chat, and we'll make sure to be flagging those for this discussion period at the end. So our first presenter is going to be Dr. Lisa Ranger, of the chair of the Delta Independent Science Board, talking on behalf of the Independent Science Board. So please, Lisa, you can show your face and take it away. We have your slides up coming next.
Well, great. Thank you, Rachel. I couldn't be more pleased to see this happening, as the Delta Independent Science Board has been a big proponent of increasing interdisciplinary and social science use in managing the Delta. So this is very much in line with what our reviews have recommended. And so I'm just going to take a little credit for this getting off the ground. Although, to be honest, I've only been the chair since October 1st, so I can only take so much credit. But next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Well, first of all, who are we, the Delta Independent Science Board? We are an interdisciplinary group. It's important to understand that we don't produce science so much as we review science. So in that sense, we are each bringing our disciplinary perspective to reviewing things and generating suggestions. But we have currently 2 social scientists, myself and Tanya Heikkila, who probably some of you have gotten to know through her presentations. And then you can read the rest of the disciplines, generally in the biophysical sciences. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I didn't say my key point, which is that we're 10 internationally and nationally recognized scientists who have been appointed to the board to do the following. The Delta Reform Act of 2009 lays out our role, which is to provide oversight of the scientific research, monitoring, and assessment programs that support adaptive management in the Delta, including through periodic reviews of programs. And just more generally, we provide independent advice on the Delta plan and program use of science, and consult with the council on the appointment of the lead scientist. This URL has more detailed information. Next slide, please. But really, where the rubber meets the road for using social science in the Delta comes in this other part of the Delta Reform Act that specifies that the management of the Delta should achieve the co-equal goals of a more reliable water supply, as well as protecting, restoring, and enhancing the Delta ecosystem. If I was going to define the co-equal goals, they would put people right in them. But as it is now, the co-equal goals are to be achieved in a manner that protects and enhances the Delta as an evolving place, which is where a lot of the issues come in terms of how are people affected by natural resource management, how do they benefit? And we shorthand these as Delta as place issues. Next slide, please. So what gets accomplished through this interdisciplinary board that's reviewing the science? The majority of what we do is evaluate the state and adequacy of the science. And what's the point of that? Well, this can be really important for achieving goals that have been agreed upon that balance different needs, because without an independent voice saying, yes, this was an adequate way to do the science, sometimes things can get hung up in court or people can refute models. I'm sure we all recognize that science happens in a very political environment in the Delta. So having that independent voice is really important for getting decisions through, especially if there are lawsuits. We also really find that given the challenges of climate change and changing resource use and needs, there's a real need to think about interdisciplinary science in a forward-looking strategy for managing climate change and land use change. So these are really the two main areas that we work in. As I said, we think about the trade-offs of management choices in terms of the co-equal goals and the Delta as place issues, as we're doing right now with the Delta Conveyance Project. The board also has a somewhat unique role in providing a stakeholder forum. We probably don't do this as well as we should, but we are a conduit for the public to make comments on what agencies are doing, and we can take up issues as a result of what we hear from stakeholders. And that just leads into our next role, which is that we really try to provide a bridge between science management and policy. I'm sure you can imagine why interdisciplinary science is really needed there. We go talk to folks who might recommend ways in which science could be used differently to address questions. But most important of all, to maintain our independence and our objectivity, we don't recommend or endorse any policy decisions. We're just really there to talk about whether the science is giving you the information you need to make good decisions. Next slide. So just to bring home a couple of points, I think what makes the Delta Independent Science Board different is this independent perspective. We're not part of the cultural norms of how science is done in any particular agency. We're there to say, we think this might be a more relevant way to analyze that. And then just more generally, we're trying to promote evolution and innovation of scientific methods, which is its own psychological issue of getting people to change. But we're here to sometimes bring up uncomfortable issues about whether we're really doing science in a way that's going to help us make the right decisions. So that's just a quick overview, and I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll have questions. So please add those to the chat and we'll loop back to them at the end for a full panel discussion. So next up, we're going to hear from Dr. Steve Culberson, the lead scientist for the Interagency Ecological Program. So Steve, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera, you could take it away. Looks like you're muted still, Steve. There we go.
There goes. Just got permission to do so. Thanks. My name is Steve Culberson. I'm the lead scientist for the Interagency Ecological Program, or IEP. The IEP is a 9-agency collaborative group structured to coordinate the collection, identification, archiving, transmission, interpretation, and publication of data and information describing the effects of water project operations on the aquatic ecology of the Delta and associated watersheds. We've been collecting and interpreting such data for 52 years now, and we think we have quite a legacy of database creation, management, and peer-reviewed publications to show for these 5 decades of state and federal scientific service to the estuary. My position is supported through an interagency memorandum of understanding funded at the Delta Stewardship Council and through the Delta Science Program to provide an independent position to help evaluate and guide science coordination and direction among the IEP agencies. We believe this interagency collaboration and independent oversight is necessary for a robust and reputable scientific program. We strive to provide science that is relevant, credible, and usable. Next slide, please. We're primarily environmental scientists with a fair bit at stake regarding the collection and maintenance of data associated with the biological state of the estuary. And because we've had to duct tape and baling wire our programs together to fulfill these mandates over the years, we've had to find creative and collaborative ways to produce more insightful, learned, analytical content that makes more sense of what we collect than just piles of data. We've struggled to put together meaningful communication materials for dissemination beyond our scientific community. We're very aware that there are very few people who read our publications beyond the community of environmental scientists and academic colleagues that we already participate in. We've not been great at working outside the traditional environmental scientist realm, and I think this has greatly hindered our ability to communicate beyond ourselves. When we assume an audience, we assume that it cares about the stuff we took decades learning about and inventing a language for, and we forget that others don't have our language or our appreciation for what it is we study and why we find that important. One of the challenges we face is a variety of audiences that need to be included in our interagency and interdisciplinary work, including technical, managerial, decision-making, and lay constituencies. Having the talent that addresses all of these audiences is difficult to find, and we typically hire for scientific and analytical priorities rather than the communication ones. Luckily, the training of scientists is increasingly including communication skills, and it's likely to do so into the future. We hope we can address these shortcomings more successfully as we go. Next slide, please. This is why, for me, advancing interdisciplinary research to include data scientists, social scientists, economists, behavioral and organizational scientists is so valuable. It helps us cross the divide to other realms of science that we really have no business studying. And of course, we have no business ignoring either. One of the burgeoning ideas of interaction that I think could use, one of the burgeoning areas of interaction that I think that could use research, documentation, and improved practice is that of organizational behavior and attention to structural interaction between agencies, between constituencies, and between areas of expertise. We're not great at managing meetings. We're not great at managing input to those meetings or our committees. We're not great at providing briefings. We're not great at developing fact sheets, et cetera, to address these overarching communication needs. We even have trouble running effective meetings and efficiently scoping our mostly ad hoc interdisciplinary communications. Next slide, please. So I think attention to these details would be a welcome step to including non-traditional areas of science into the IEP discourse and into our organization. I look to this community and to workshops such as this for ideas, research, tools, and collegial advice on how we might best proceed. I also hope that increasingly members of the social science community will embed themselves into our routine interagency collaborative ventures. We need to embrace and learn how to more effectively interact as scientists and as members of the community if we want our technically sound science to mean much to anybody beyond ourselves. So thanks for inviting me to give these brief remarks. I look forward to answering any questions and participating in the breakout sessions later today. I look forward to moving into an interdisciplinary and interagency future together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was really fantastic. Next up, we are going to hear from Alex Thompson, an environmental planner from the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, who's going to be speaking on behalf of the Wetland Regional Monitoring Program. Just a reminder, if you have any questions for our presenters, please add those to the chat now. We'll also have time at the end for this panel discussion. So Alex, please turn on your camera and you can take it away.
Thanks, Rachel. And can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So like Rachel said, I'm going to be giving an overview of the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program for the San Francisco Estuary, also known as the WRMP. So this is an emerging program co-administered by the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, where I work, and the San Francisco Estuary Institute. We're seeking to inform decision-making about wetlands in the San Francisco Estuary through collaborative regional monitoring. And to do that, we're bringing together lots of different stakeholders with an interest in wetland management and restoration, including scientists, tribes, community groups, regulators, land managers, and others, to understand the information needs that all of these different stakeholders have in order to improve future restoration and management. With our ultimate goal being to increase the pace and scale of wetland restoration in the estuary through streamlining and learning more from permit-driven monitoring. So we have a comprehensive science framework in place developed collaboratively in 2018 and 2019, which is adaptively managed over time as new issues and needs emerge. We're in the process of developing a monitoring site network and an open data sharing platform. Next, please. So the program is guided by a steering committee and advised by a technical advisory committee. And the WRMP has started off with a focus on the San Francisco Bay or lower estuary, including Sassoon Bay, due to limited funding and just a need to get something started and then expand later. And so what we've been doing is coordinating and trying to align with partners and monitoring programs in the Delta through representation on our committees and work groups, which aren't pictured here. Next, please. So our goals are to understand how tidal wetlands are doing in the face of climate change and other stressors, improve efficiency in wetland restoration permitting and monitoring to reduce the burden on people who implement projects, create shareable data that uses consistent methods so that different monitoring efforts around the region can learn from each other and improve future restoration and protection. And also to understand how wetland efforts are serving people, including tribes and frontline communities. Next, please. So these are the guiding questions at the heart of our science framework that help us determine what we're actually going to monitor and how in order to answer these questions. So they cover things like distribution of wetlands, impacts of stressors, effects on plants and animals, learning about restoration success. And this last one is on connections between people and wetlands. Can you go to the next, please? Yeah, so just to highlight, you can stay on that one, thanks. Just to highlight this one a little bit more, it was initially developed with this focus, highlighting public health, safety, and recreation, because these were the areas with more direct relevance to the regulatory partners and special districts who have been instrumental in getting this program started. But with an increasing focus on equity around the region and nationwide, that's been a more recent driver to expand this question and make sure it reflects the values, priorities, and knowledge of additional stakeholders like frontline communities and tribes. So you can go next now. Thanks. So we've started this new People and Wetlands work group to sort of reevaluate that guiding question and identify additional indicators about human connections to wetlands to add to our existing biological and geophysical indicators. So in this work, we're trying to incorporate additional forms and sources of knowledge like traditional ecological knowledge and social science, elevate the values of frontline communities and tribes, meet the information needs that regulators, funders, and other audiences have about human connections to wetlands, foster shared understanding of wetland knowledge and information needs for communities and tribes, and evaluate questions of equity, like whether benefits of restoration projects are distributed equitably across communities. Last slide, please. Yeah, so I just wanted to end by saying that I've really benefited a lot from being able to meet with and learn from social and interdisciplinary scientists as someone with a natural science background in leading this work. So I really appreciate this series of events and helping build this community. And if anyone is interested in connecting about the WRMP, feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you so much, Alex. And I see that there are a couple of questions that have been added to the chat. So if you want to take a peek at those before the panel discussion, go ahead. And I encourage others to add their questions as well. So last but not least, we're going to hear from Bruce DeGennaro, the owner of the Essex Partnership, speaking on behalf of the Collaborative Science and Adaptive Management Program. Bruce, if you could come on the screen and take it away.
Great, thanks,
Thank
Rachel. Appreciate the opportunity, and definitely look forward to the breakouts and kind of meeting and talking with you some more on what I think is a pretty important topic area. We can go to the next slide. So this is just a little bit about what CSAMP is. That's our acronym, and as Rachel said, that's Collaborative Science and Adaptive Management Program. We're strictly voluntary, and you can see the parties that are a part of that, resource agencies, both state and federal, public water agencies, primarily water districts that withdraw water from the Delta, to the south of Delta, using the state and federal projects, and then also environmental groups, non-governmental organizations. And you can see our focus there on science and adaptive management, which is in our name. And again, kind of focused on operations in the Delta, water deliveries, and then how that relates to species recovery. So next slide. This is just to give you a sense for who all those participants are. We have a policy group that serves as like a board of directors. There are about 20 members that represent these organizations there. And then we have a management level team of about 12 folks that kind of handle more of the day-to-day operations of what we are trying to do. Next slide. We work in three basic areas, or kind of serve three primary roles. You see them there. The first being a forum for communication and exchange of information between these three different groups. And then secondly, acting as a catalyst. So if we collectively see something where we think we can maybe get some activity, or we feel something needs some attention, we can kind of shine a flashlight on that and suggest that maybe something be done to look at the issue. And then thirdly, we do generate some technical information. We have work groups that do some pretty interesting science work. And so we'll pull that information together and share that within CSAMP through, up through our policy group, and then also disseminating that in other ways, sharing it, posting it on our website, things like that. So that's how we operate. Next slide. So in terms of interdisciplinary work, I mentioned the communication. Obviously, that's pretty central to what we do, and so just that kind of social interaction and science of how do we communicate, how do we share, is pretty important to try to do well. And I think there's always opportunities for improvements there. The two things listed on this slide are just two particular initiatives that we have currently underway that I think require an engagement of social science expertise and really an interdisciplinary look. The first one is an effort to look Central Valley wide at at salmon recovery. It was initiated by CSAMP. It's since been funded by the Delta Science Program. And one of the key aspects of that is really looking at first establishing some scientific recovery objectives, but then kind of adding a layer, which is stakeholder values, as we kind of look at activities that could be undertaken in the Valley to improve recovery. Obviously, what people care about and where their values are is central to success. So that's a big part of that study. It's a big part of its scope, and that's all underway as we speak. And then the second one listed there is a newer effort that we've taken on to try to look at monitoring in the Delta and the monitoring enterprise. And as part of that, we are coordinating with some researchers at UC Davis to help us analyze some survey information that we receive from our membership. And we're asking some pretty qualified social scientists there to help us see if there's some more we can glean from that data. We've done kind of a qualitative summary of that, but we're hopeful we can actually get some maybe quantitative information out of that. So I think that's a good example of engaging with social scientists to help us do our job better. You know, we're also, just as we look at how monitoring is done, as I said earlier, the communication piece and the engagement is really central to kind of our evaluation. So look forward to further conversations. I think that's the last slide, Rachel. Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Bruce. And contact information is here in case anyone has questions after this. But we can stop sharing the screen now so we can facilitate our discussion. We have a few minutes, and we have one question that's in the chat. I actually want to see, Deirdre, if you wouldn't mind asking your question and letting us know if there's a particular panel member that you are hoping to hear from, and we can make sure that you can. Deirdre, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, just a minute. Let me get it in the chat.
Perfect.
So there was this extreme flooding in British Columbia last year. I think it was in early November. And David Wallace Wells, apologies, said, "We aren't just failing to address the growing climate crisis to come. We're unprepared even for the impacts already here, in part because they keep surprising us with their intensity, and in part because we can't seem to fathom our genuine vulnerability." So this is sort of a question for all panelists, because we've seen some extreme climate impacts, particularly with, you know, the drought. Have you felt surprised by, you know, and the wildfires? Have you felt surprised by the intensity of climate impacts in recent years? And do you feel that we're unprepared for the impacts that are already here? And if so, why or why not?
One of our panelists want to take that question.
So Rachel, I'm happy to take a swing at it from a kind of water supply perspective, which obviously is pretty relevant to California. I don't think that our membership is surprised. You know, California in the West is you know, has been subject of extremes for a while, at least in terms of drought and flood. So you know, I wouldn't necessarily say they were surprised. You know, although, you know, we got some heat waves this summer that were, you know, records. As far as how well prepared we are, I think we probably have a long ways to go there in terms of, you know, the issue of allocation of, you know, limited water supplies and dealing with, you know, extreme droughts. And then what will we know from history will be big floods. And so how well prepared we are for that, I think that's an open question. I mean, I think policymakers and, you know, and all their staff are working hard at developing, you know, drought contingency plans and other ways of trying to anticipate, forecast, and adjust for those kinds of extremes. But I'm not sure our system is actually fully capable of accommodating those. And we've already seen the impacts on a lot of our native species and in the ecosystems that come with that. So, I would argue we are not adequately prepared, but I think people are working on it.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
Please do.
Yeah, so Deirdre, I completely agree. This is a critical issue to address, and the ISB is taking this on. We have a new initiative that's ongoing with a focus on decision-making under uncertainty, because we are surprised. We will continue to be surprised no matter how good we make our models. We're going to be surprised. So I think the thing is to just be prepared for contingencies and not, especially if we're really serious about the co-equal goals, because right now it's like, oops, we don't have enough water. The species have to take a back seat. If we're going to really balance those, we need to be better prepared. So I think we very much want to think about how do we get in front of some of these potential extreme conditions. And so it's not going to be a silver bullet, but we want to help people overcome some of the cognitive biases that can prevent us from thinking creatively about the future and in order to be better prepared.
Steve, you want to add to that as well? Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Oops, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I'm on a restricted microphone, which is probably not a bad idea. Yeah, so I think within the scientific community, within the IEP, not that we were writing the interagency or the IPCC reports or anything like that, although we know people who were contributing to those documents, right? None of this is terribly surprising. I think the rapidity with which it arrived probably caught a lot of us a little bit off guard, but I also think that it's one of the things that had we our failure to effectively engage policymakers with some of our ongoing communications, it probably led to the delays with which the community is actually responding. So I think part of the thing that we can feel responsible for and see solutions to fixing pretty quickly is this idea that we need to spend more time alongside the policymakers, and they need to help us understand what questions are best put to us from their perspectives. I know Bruce and I are interacting in some venues where traditionally, once a year in an annual report, you sort of throw stuff over the wall to the other community. And then you spend a year thinking that you're working on the things that they want you to work on. And then after a year, another report gets thrown back the other direction. And, ultimately, when you've got 20 years, you iterate to something of usefulness. But I think one of the things the climate crisis is showing us is that we don't have 20 years to respond effectively to some of these things. And the communication piece is something I feel that it's really, we're not, we've got world-class science and world-class policymaking going on in California, undeniably. The communication between those communities is not quite so world-class.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. So there is another question in the chat that I actually would hope that we can get to, but I think we need to move on just so we stay on time with our breakout sessions. But I would encourage our panelists to respond in the chat to this question about, how the question is, how do I know, or how do you all know if you're duplicating efforts or synthesizing information across groups? Getting at the fact that we've heard from all these different groups and all the work that's going on, and how are we having coordination and not duplicating efforts to kind of tackle some of these big problems. So would be really curious to hear from some of the panelists in the chat. And I know that there's also some other chatter in there. Thank you, Louise, for that addition. So please continue to use the chat as we move forward. But we're now going to jump into our kind of overview about the breakout sessions for today. But just want to say a huge thank you to our four presenters just now. I really think this is a really great way to kind of get the discussion going, hearing about current issues, and getting us in the mindset of thinking about how to take an interdisciplinary approach to tackle some of these problems. So Jess, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the slides, we're going to give a quick overview with the whole group about what we're planning to do in the breakout sessions today before we send you all off into your virtual breakout rooms. And Beck is going to kick this off.
Okay, excellent talks, and thank you again. So I want to walk everybody through the overarching goals for the breakout sessions today. And it's an old cliche, but it's true. It's not the destination, but the journey, and that applies here. So some of the most valuable things I think you can take away from today's workshop are a broader professional community to lean into, the ability to see problems from new perspectives, and to generate new ideas that could potentially help shape the future of the Delta and beyond. And now that you have your goals, what boundaries will help us get there? I'm so glad you asked. Be present, right? You've already allocated the time to be physically here, so keep your thoughts with you. Ideas, let them be wild. Let them connect, let them build on each other, and remember that this is a space to share ideas. We are here to create a better process together and consider how you want to credit this session for future work. And if you encompass the gift of gab, maybe try exercising the listening muscle a little bit today. If you tend to be an expert at observation, lean in, be vocal, share your thoughts in this process. And don't forget that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So make space for curiosity within yourself and others, even if you're an expert in the subject matter. And this will all be covered again, but I just want to emphasize these points. On the next slide, we are going to use Mural, an online whiteboard platform, to facilitate breakout sessions. So that'll be coming up. So the flow of breakout sessions, again, you'll hear this again, but the outline is 80 minutes. So you'll have time to get to know others in your room, decide on a topic, and lean into your facilitator if you are having a tough time making a decision there. Don't spend too much time in that process. Brainstorm a conceptual model, develop a proposal, and share that proposal with the larger group. And again, I emphasize, focus on the journey. Don't rush through the collaborative process in an effort to have a polished end product. And now I'll pass it back to Rachel to give you some framework for the breakout session and walk you through Mural.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beck. Next slide, please. So we're going to be framing, as you all have already known, by selecting in your registration which management need you're going to be. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about why we picked the Science Action Agenda as the framing for today's breakout session. So Science Action Agenda is a collaboratively produced document that prioritizes and aligns science actions to address management needs on a 4 to 5 year time frame. And this update was produced earlier, it was published earlier this year. And so it's a highly interdisciplinary and covers the wide breadth of topics that are important in the Delta. One important use of the Science Action Agenda is to guide science funding and prioritizing science investments. So for those reasons, we're using the Science Action Agenda to guide today's breakout room discussion. Thank you all for selecting your preferred breakout sessions during your registration. We did our best to sort folks into their preferred option, but we did remove one of the management needs and added duplicates for the rooms for some of the management needs based on interest. So you might be in group 1A or 1B or groups 3A, 3B, or 3C. So we had a lot of interest in our third one, this expanding multi-benefit approaches to managing the Delta. So again, there's duplicate rooms. So we have 8 concurrent sessions. And in that right now we're having our kind of facilitators on the back end sorting us in the breakout room. So thanks all for your patience once we get going with that. And also a big thank you to our facilitators who have done a lot of prep work to help participants through this process in the breakout rooms, especially with narrowing down a topic to work through. So you'll see kind of what that process is as we share Mural and once you're in the breakout room, but big thanks to our facilitators and our note takers. Next slide, please. So a bulk of the conversation in the breakout rooms is going to be focusing on discussing the social and biophysical components of a topic that you select, identifying drivers and linkages, and building a conceptual model. So a conceptual model can be very useful, especially for collaboration. That fosters learning by allowing people to exchange ideas, reconcile different perceptions, and reach a common group perception. So we wanted to provide a space for people to be a part of the process to define the problem and relevant solutions. So these are just some examples that we have here on the screen, and there are a bunch of examples in Mural, and there'll be guidance from your facilitators, but we essentially want to try to produce some sort of visual overview of the different components and elements of the project or problem that you'll be tackling. And we're not going to be judging how far these get. As Beck has said, this is about the journey, the process. But we do want to see the team work across disciplines and consider the human and biophysical components of the question that you're tackling. And again, there's going to be a lot of examples on the Mural board with links to additional resources for those that are very curious. Next slide, please. And after working through the conceptual diagram, we ask that you save time to put some of those ideas to paper in preparing a mock proposal. And we've provided a template in the Mural board, which I'll show you soon, for preparing your mock proposal. For example, what's the question that you're tackling or key topic you're tackling? What approach or methods would you use? And maybe what disciplines, who should be involved, and maybe where could you potentially get this funded? We want you to start thinking about those ideas and going through the process of working as a team to put those to paper. And lastly, we're going to ask that the group also share out at the end of the breakout sessions, about 3 minutes per group, or share out to the full group about what topic you selected, what those components were that you discussed, and if there are any barriers. Again, this is a whole learning experiment, this event. And so we want to be making sure that folks are mindful of just the process itself. I'll note where you can kind of think about those and capture those barriers on the Mural board. So again, final reminder to focus today's breakout sessions on the process, not necessarily the end product. I lied, it's not the final reminder. I'm now going to show you a Mural. So Jess, if you don't mind, stop sharing. I'm going to switch to the Mural board. And hopefully I do this correctly. Give me one sec. One sec. Currently I have too many screens open. See. Okay, hang on, sorry. There we go. Okay, got it. Sorry about that. All right, so this is probably very terrifying to look at. You should see a very zoomed out Mural board that's very complicated. And that's correct. You are in the right place. You're seeing the right thing. But this Mural board, I'll keep it very zoomed out right now. It's an online tool for doing collaborative work. And we've, again, put a lot of time into kind of creating a structure here. And our facilitators and note takers have been working in this Mural board. Each group has their own Mural board to facilitate collaboration. And we just want to kind of have something to facilitate the process. And I'm going to go through a few kind of key tips and pointers and reminders about Mural before you all get whisked away to your own breakout session. So some of this will be repeated in the Zoom room. But essentially, there's a few tips I want to give everybody for Mural. The first is click and drag. A key use or a key tool for Mural is you're going to click and drag things around. That's going to be your number one go-to as you use Mural if you're not familiar. That's one way to navigate. Click and drag. Things shouldn't move if they are meant to not move. Some things that move because they're allowed to move. The second is because this board is very complicated, you're going to be zooming in and you can go very far. You can zoom in very, very far. And again, click and drag, zoom in, zoom out. You also, fun thing is you can just use Control-C or Control-V with normal functions. If you need to copy something and paste it, you can do that. But if you also make a mistake and you accidentally move something, you can Control-V and you can undo it. It'll undo it, magical. And then if you also want to, one of the things you'll be doing as an interactive participant is actually typing in notes. So I'm going to zoom all the way over here to the far right bottom corner of the Mural board. And I want to highlight this in particular. This is our little, whoa, barriers, hurdles, this person tripping. This is where participants can think about what barriers am I encountering as we're going through this process. let's capture them here. Again, we're trying to learn through this process, learn through the messy parts of doing interdisciplinary work. So you double click and you say, hello, and type your additions there, your thoughts. And then a couple other just last points. When in doubt, ask your facilitator or note taker for help. You have someone from the Delta Stewardship Council taking notes, and then there's a facilitator, our social scientist facilitators. Thank you all again, who are going to be taking the charge in the room. And if you have any questions, they're there to help. And then some of us are going to be floating around here to help as well. And then last reminder, it's about the process. Don't forget about that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quickly, and I'm going to ask that everybody turns on their camera. You probably didn't see that one coming. How do I stop sharing? Okay, everyone can please turn on their cameras. This is a good tester for us before we go into the breakout rooms, because you're all going to be on your cameras there. But also, we're going to take a group photo. So folks can just, we're trying to make the most of having this be a virtual event instead of us being, here bonding in person. So big smiles, everybody. We're going to take a couple of these pictures. So great. Everyone looks great. Oh, wait, where's my second tool? There we go. Hey, big smiles for bonding activity. Yay. All right, I'm going to save that one. Hang on one sec. I'm going to do that again. Okay, big smiles. I'm going to the other screen. We have a lot of participants. Everyone looks so amazing. All right, bonding again. Smile. Okay, that's number 2. We have to take one more because again, we have a lot of people on here. Pick 2. Great. Okay, bear with me. You're all doing a fantastic job. I'm going to the next screen. Everyone smile again. Okay, one more. Yay. Okay, we got it. Okay, fantastic. That was great. Okay, I'm done subjecting you all to taking photos. I really appreciate it. So what's going to happen now? I'm just quickly checking. It doesn't seem like there's any pressing questions in the chat, which is great. So we, I think, are ready to send everybody off into their breakout rooms. So Brandon and Beck, you are free to whisk folks away. Once you're in the room, you're going to have a facilitator and a note taker introduce themselves for the session. So you won't be alone, but if there's anybody that's lingering and it doesn't get sent away into a breakout room, you'll be in the main Zoom room, and Beck and I are here to help you, and we'll make sure that you get to the right place. So no one will be lost. But final wishes to have a great breakout session, enjoy the process, and think through kind of what notes you want to take and report out to us later about how it goes. So best of luck, and yeah, Brandon and Beck, take it away. See that it's all happening.
That we discussed. Sorry. Yeah, so some areas of public concern tied to this issue are the salinity impacts to agriculture, harmful algal blooms on fishing, aquatic vegetation on boating. And as we went through this, we figured out that they're not clearly tied to a social or ecological issue. They're really spanning across both disciplines. And so some interesting discussion points that were brought up and that we were thinking about in our model was what the alternatives are for salinity management. So if you were to stick with a status quo approach versus like a restoration alternative, what are the resulting impacts on local communities, and like specifically what are the socioeconomic impacts? So we kind of went back and forth on what the pros and cons of those different alternatives are. And yeah, some additional points. Sorry, I'm just reading at the notes that we have written down. Science community focuses on fishing and boating communities in the Delta. And a lot of people are also concerned with ag, and it would be helpful to have a physical or biological scientist understand social science more, and vice versa. So yeah, I think generally some of the benefits of looking at this topic from an interdisciplinary lens is that a lot of people in our breakout room had a previous history with this topic, but weren't aware of how others were looking at the issue. Like one of the people in our breakout room, has worked a lot with vulnerable communities and EJ, and she brought forth some questions that she hears a lot from the public that other people were not aware of and are not reflected in necessarily the management questions that we have. So that was really helpful to talk through. I think some of the barriers are kind of the typical ones of just getting on the same language as one another. And also we had a little less people than we were expecting in the breakout room. And so we thought maybe with more more people, there would have been more ideas across the disciplines. So I think those are all of the main points, but if anyone else has anything to share, go for it.
That's great. You hit on some of the key challenges in interdisciplinary research that have been identified in the literature, things like the terminology and not being aware of other research in other disciplines and that kind of thing. Thanks. Let's, if there are questions about specific groups, I guess if they're like burning a hole in your brain, raise your hand on Zoom, and otherwise you can pop them in the chat and we might have a minute or a few minutes to discuss at the end, but I'd like to get through each group first. Next in reverse alphabetical order is Rosemary/Lindsay. I did it by the R.
All right. Hi, I wasn't expecting that with the C.
Sorry, I realized I knew you were going to present.
Threw me off. Okay,
yeah, sorry.
It's all good. We were a very adaptive group. So our breakout room merged management need 4, build and integrate knowledge on social processes and behavior of Delta communities and residents to support effective and equitable management, as well as management needs 6, which is assess and anticipate impacts of climate change and extreme events to support successful adaptation strategies. And we, just like this moment here, had to adapt on the fly a bit. So we hit some hurdles just by combining groups and everyone sort of refocusing the topical discussion. So we ended up selecting a topic, a drought-focused topic, started from sourced from the pre-prompted idea to develop modeling and participatory planning scenario for a 25-year drought in California. And we expanded this to think about stakeholder mapping and understand who is impacted, who has different trade-offs, and had a lot of discussion about who our audiences are, what are the challenges we face there. We struggled a bit in jumping to some solutions and really had to take a step back to think about what the problem is and how to coalesce around that. So we didn't get through the entire exercise to a proposal, but we talked about going about addressing this issue through multiple approaches. We talked about participatory planning, stakeholder network mapping. We talked about different frameworks like structured decision-making. We talked about alternative and non-traditional ways of planning, like involving artists to engage people who think differently than sort of the conceptual model framework we were trying to use as scientists with boxes and arrows. And we were really, I guess, our conversation highlighted some of the challenges of not enough time to think about these issues and with really diverse perspectives. We had a very diverse group of folks with varying sort of thoughts and experiences with social science integration, as well as from a disciplinary background standpoint. We also had the same sort of challenges and thoughts around the need for shared definitions when we talk about what is community, who are stakeholders, and even defining what is meant by impacts or different types of impacts. So I guess that's sort of where we left off. Certainly enjoyed the conversation in discussing sort of all the different thoughts and approaches. But we recognize in the exercise the value of this type of workshop to really bring together diverse thinking, and we need more space to do that. So I'd invite others in the group to add on if there's time.
I just wanted to add that one of the neat ideas that really came out, and I think Brett suggested it, was don't go in there with a pre-planned idea, but really talk to the stakeholders and start with that to find out what the key questions are and how the drouught's impacting them, and then kind of structure the exercise around that. And I did mention the Q methodology as a way of doing that. I don't know that people were aware of it, but it was really good talk.
Yeah, thanks. I was in this group, so I'm not biased, but I thought it was a good discussion despite our challenges. Okay, thanks. Pam, you are next in our reverse alphabet.
Yes. Well, our group turned out to be a few less people than had signed up for it. And the ones who were there are more of the social science side of things. And then several of them are along, facilitation, planning type of people. So we did pick a very big picture idea, which I will go into. We were looking at management need number 1, just like Tara, which, but we were a little bit of a different subfocus. So we were looking at the largely improving coordination and integration of large scale experiments, data collection, and evaluation across regions and institutions. We looked at Science Action 1B, evaluate the individual and institutional factors that enable or present barriers to coordination, learning, trusting, and using scientific information. And more specifically, we started off looking at different opportunities or barriers to developing a common vision for the Delta. But obviously we refined that a lot as we went along. And it was challenging because it was such a big picture idea. And, we realized about midway that we were mostly looking at the social science side of things, but I think everybody was knowledgeable enough of the physical science that we were definitely able to add that in to our conceptual map. And we realized that there is the existing network mapping and the Delta Science Plan, and we decided to kind of take that a step further and really look at the layers within that network that's already there, looking at the interagency and intra-agency different priorities for the different roles within an agency and the different issue areas that the different agencies are mandated, or either legally mandated or by geographic scope mandated to deal with. And ultimately we decided the way to go about this. We didn't quite get to the full written proposal, but I think we have this idea of picking an existing project and then looking at the different layers and the different priorities of the agencies that are involved in that project. And then also looking within the agencies, how the different roles, the staff versus the directors, are envisioning the priorities or of what the agency's goal is there. So I think it was an interesting exercise, and it seemed like we were tackling the impossible at the beginning, but I think we actually got somewhere, and we had some good discussion.
That's neat. That's really heartening to hear. I wonder if any groups got the proposal. Maybe we'll hear from the people who are sharing, but we might have planned a little more than we could get through with this exercise. Okay, thanks, Pam. Kira, you are up next.
Our group had management need 3, so expanding multi-benefit approaches to managing the Delta as a social ecological system. So we kind of started with thinking that we wanted to think about like co-benefits and trade-offs that happen for a few different benefits from different land management actions. And so kind of narrowed it down to thinking about addressing flood protection, subsidence reversal, and carbon sequestration. And then decided we might need to narrow down our land management actions a bit. So we kind of settled on thinking about like agricultural farming practices and crop choices, and then thinking if maybe we could think about studying some of those interactions. And so we had a pretty nice discussion about our conceptual model and thought about a few different physical and social components of the system, which was great. Some kind of more social influences on crop choice, for example, different kind of either like farmer knowledge and farmer like economic ability and subsidies and government policies, and then also more kind of like soil and water components, and then also thinking about how that all kind of links with carbon sequestration and carbon pricing and the effect on levee stability and flooding, and then how that might affect housing or other agriculture. So we kind of had a lot of arrows going on, which was nice. And so we did end up getting to somewhat of a proposal stage, which was nice. And ended up looking and thinking about maybe if we might be able to do kind of a more focused kind of case study approach and think about a specific area. So we were talking a bit about Alton and Brannan Island, and if maybe that area would be a good focus because of some of the flooding concerns being experienced, and if there's an opportunity to kind of do a combination of more physical science studying kind of actual changes from different crop choices with studies of more kind of talking to farmers and finding out about kind of opportunities for how to coordinate kind of crop choices and how that can affect the larger landscape as a potential topic. It's kind of where we got. But one interesting barrier that got brought up that I think is useful to mention is like, which I'm sure has come up a lot, is we kind of talked about how sometimes it can be hard in large interdisciplinary projects to manage kind of the expectations that different disciplines have about other disciplines and other teams and what they're tackling for aspects of the project. Particularly if, you know, there's, for example, sometimes I'm not aware as a social scientist of aspects of physical science aspects of the project. And so can kind of assume or expect certain aspects of the project or questions that can be answered that can or can't or might need different resources. And so that can always be a challenge to kind of meet in the middle and discuss that and make sure everyone's happy. So.
Neat, thanks. Yeah, that's a good point that there are also like sort of cultural challenges to how social scientists and natural scientists do their work. In addition to the content of what we're doing, it's like how we do it. Yeah, that's a neat point. Thanks. Cameron, you are next up in our order. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jill. So our group had, hang on, let me go back to my mural here. So our group was addressing management need 5, which was acquire new knowledge and synthesize existing knowledge of interacting stressors to support species recovery and ecosystem health. That's a pretty broad management need, and our work was pretty broad. The kind of topic that we settled on was to kind of build some sort of decision framework or decision model to evaluate management strategies for managing multiple stressors affecting survival of fish migrating through the Delta, which is a big topic. And it took us a while to kind of wrap our heads around that, but I think it was a good exercise. So what we sort of set out to do was to kind of set up a framework for when you have kind of multiple stressors and multiple ecological goals, and then also multiple impacted communities. How do you evaluate each of those kind of competing goals and impacts and strategies in terms of like an integrated framework where anything you do affects multiple parties? And so we started by sort of setting up a pretty rudimentary kind of conceptual model where we were talking about sort of management actions flowing into the physical conditions of the system, and then those conditions impacting both human communities and your ecological outcomes. We kind of discussed kind of specific instances of kind of what types of things we would want to measure. We kind of took as a sort of case study looking at sort of like what are the impacts of a drought scenario. And so we tried to lay out kind of like what are the sort of physical impacts that we would need to measure, and how would we kind of evaluate what are the human impacts of management actions. One thing that we kind of discussed a lot and settled on was that our perception, at least, is that there's a lot of information out there on the Delta as kind of a physical and even an economic system. So a lot of this work would be synthetic and integrative rather than kind of producing new kind of basic research. Although one component that we identified was more of the sort of social impact analysis and other kind of human dimensions, kind of identifying kind of how to segment communities and then also how to evaluate the things that are important to them, like the benefits that they would derive from the Delta, kind of how to assess those and then how to incorporate those into a management process. We, like others, didn't get too far on the proposal aspect, but it was a great, I think, brainstorming exercise. One thing I do want to mention, because it was kind of the last word before we got the countdown clock, was that, you know, especially given sort of the fact that climate change is on top of us, that it's really important to continue monitoring conditions in the Delta as they progress. And so there was, I think, some concern that we may not be as able to do that in the future, but that was really important, so that we should keep those data coming. In terms of difficulties, I think, you know, we kind of worked fairly well together, I guess, across disciplines. We were split kind of 2 physical scientists and 2 social scientists, and that was interesting. I think we were interested in learning about the other's kind of perspective. Our biggest barrier was probably that we picked a really big topic and it was hard to wrangle it into a smaller, more manageable piece. But yeah, that was what we came up with. It was a great opportunity. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, good point about the monitoring data and like needing to keep doing that. And we heard from Alex this morning about the wetland regional monitoring program that's starting to add or planning to add some, you know, human indicators into regional monitoring efforts. So maybe next time we do this workshop, we'll have some more diverse monitoring data to use, which would be cool. Ajay, you're next. Nadina, you'll wrap it up for us.
And wrap it up. Great. So yeah, so our group was made up of quite a diverse audience, I guess, of participants. We had anybody from social scientists, natural scientists, and we even had a couple people who were really interested in how you kind of wrap up all this all this information and try to present it to the public. And so we talked a little bit about that as well. So our management strategy that we did was with Need 3, it was to expand multi-benefit approaches to managing the Delta as a social ecological system. Because we had such a diverse list of participants, we started talking about, well, what does that look like in the Delta? Let's start there and try to understand in particular, identify the vulnerabilities in the Delta in regards to shorelines, ecosystems, but also try to understand what are the social vulnerabilities as well. So what we did is we spent the bulk of our time trying to try to conceptually construct a social ecological system within the Delta. And we had a really messy conceptual model that didn't look like anything like the examples that you gave us, Jill. But it was pretty interesting. We started to group and separate some of the major components of the systems and try to understand the connections between them. And what I thought was pretty interesting was, one, is we were identifying some of the things that we know are happening in the Delta, but also we started to, right before we got cut off, we were starting to talk about some of the emerging issues that we see coming out. And we started to have a conversation about housing development and encroachment of development on the Delta, and how that is going to be exacerbating some vulnerabilities of communities around the Delta, but also talking about this idea of how is that going to be affecting species moving forward, because we also probably are going to be doing some facilitated adaptation and trying, if we are going to be getting some coastal inundation and inundation of shorelines around the Delta, we're going to have to expand somewhere. And if there are people in the way, it's going to be harder for us to do that. It was already pointed out that we're having those issues right now. And so we can only see, as more people move into the Delta region, that it's going to get worse as climate changes and everything changes, right? So I'll leave it there, but yeah, it was really interesting, and I thought it was a useful exercise. So yeah, that's where we left it. We didn't get to the proposal. Sorry, Joe.
That's fine. I'm glad that you had a messy conceptual diagram. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
That means you had a lot of information in there. Okay, and then last up, Adina, I didn't forget about you.
Rochelle is going to report for
okay,
us.
Great. Oh, I had you in the wrong alphabetical order then.
I thought I wasn't gonna have to do it, darn it. So we were focused on management need 3, which is expanding multi-benefit approaches to managing the Delta as a social ecological system. We started out talking about comparing managed wetland restoration and rice growing for multiple benefits and trade-offs. But I think the takeaway that we agreed that I would share here is that this process kind of highlighted some of the problems that we come to interdisciplinary work with. This exercise was really an example of why we need to do this a bit more strategically and think about how our group dynamics and behavior, human behavior within these groups is just as important as talking about the topic itself. We talked a bit about how we all come to these workshops with a large amount of technical expertise, and we just want to share all of that technical expertise. And it can be kind of hard to step back and say, why do we care about this issue? Maybe we should talk about that aspect of the research before we delve into how do we tackle these specific problems. I'm just going to say before I'll turn it over to my group mates, but I am super biased in this because I study how to motivate collective action and how to integrate the human dimensions of science into its practice in order to include more voices. So this is literally what I study. So it's always interesting to view the group dynamics. And the topic that we picked was very similar to the funded project I have in the Delta. So I came with all of these biases. I think it would have been a really great discussion to talk about all of our biases before we jumped into the discussion of like, what should we do? So yeah, we didn't get super far, but I think we all had a lot of great ideas. We just all didn't talk about what the main point was before we all spit out those great ideas onto the page. Does anyone else from my group want to share?
Thanks, Rochelle. This is totally in your wheelhouse. So I'm glad that you were part of this exercise. Well, we are right on time for this workshop today, which is something of a small miracle. So thanks everyone for your participation, for your effort, for your attention, your brains. We hope that some of the discussions that you've had today, or some of the ideas you'll carry back into your own work in a small way or in a large way. Maybe you've met some new people or been introduced to some new concepts today that will be useful and fruitful going forward as we all work to tackle these grand challenges in the Delta. I'm now going to introduce Henry DeBay, who's the Delta Stewardship Council's new Deputy Executive Officer for Science. And Henry, I'm going to try to spotlight your video. Did Henry just get big for everybody? Okay, great.
And for me too. I'm going to just ignore that. Thanks, Jill. So and hi, everybody. As Jill mentioned, my name is Henry DeBay. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer for Science at the Delta Stewardship Council. And really, I just want to take this opportunity to say this is not the end. And so I want to highlight some next steps that we at the council plan to undertake with the goal of keeping the momentum of this workshop series going. And you can see some of this on the screen here. So in terms of next steps, firstly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, implementing the 2022 to 2026 Science Action Agenda, which if you hadn't interacted with it before, you did today. And this document was released earlier this year and really encompasses input from across the Delta Science and Management community. And as you probably picked up on today as well, includes a number of integrated and interdisciplinary science actions. So we are going to continue the good fight of implementing that document. Another next step is funding critical science. The Delta Science Program has funded some interdisciplinary science in the past, but plans to continue that trend through a number of different mechanisms, including what we call proposal solicitations, or essentially calls for research. And our next one is slated to be announced in late 2023, so late next year. And maybe we'll see some in maybe a different shapes, maybe more polished conceptual models, but maybe we'll see some proposals from this group next year, and that would be fantastic. So another mechanism through which we're going to continue to fund this sort of science is through early career fellowships. And the next round of applications for those fellowships will also likely be in late 2023. And there are other mechanisms that we use. We refer to them as directed actions. So funding science will be a key next step. And next, supporting research synthesis. And we do synthesis in a variety of different ways, but two ways to highlight are the science program led State of Bay Delta Science peer-reviewed articles, and also through collaborations with NCES, or the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis. And in fact, our next NCES synthesis effort will be centered on a social ecological project. And then just in terms of the most immediate next step, I want to encourage those of you in and around Sacramento to join us for a networking event at Drake's The Barn in West Sacramento, beginning in a little over an hour at 5 o'clock. And last but not least, just want to say a really big thank you to all of you on the call and others who joined earlier today or last week, just for this very unique and compelling workshop series. So a big thank you to our speakers, to all of you participants, to note takers, facilitators, and to the organizers, including members of the social science community of practice and folks from the council, including Dr. Jessica Rudnick, Rachel Klopfenstein, Dr. Jill Harris, and Beck Barger, who really have been instrumental in planning and executing this workshop series. So big thank you, and big pat on the back to everybody. And with that, I will pass it off to Jess to close us out.
Thank you, Henry. And I echo that. Thanks to everyone who's still on the call here. You made it to the end. It's a hard trade-off to give you enough time to actually get into the juicy part of the conversation versus stay on time. And I know that people want to go at 4 p.m. So we're gonna wrap up. I do want to just echo again, thank you to all the facilitators. We gave you a really big, hairy ask to take on, and you executed it with a lot of adaptive grace, which we hope we can only mirror that in some of our, management and science challenges going forward. So really appreciate your time going into this. I think we're all blown away with the collective knowledge in the room. And if we could spend like 3 weeks together creating a huge conceptual model of the Delta all in one place, wow, imagine where we would get. So maybe that'll be next year's version of this workshop. And I think a big takeaway is more time to do this, because it's hard when you're coming from a lot of different perspectives. But we really appreciate your patience, your willingness to try, your commitment to being here, which started a lot sooner than today. We know if you're in the room, you've been committing to this for a long time. And we hope that you will continue to do so as we all grow and learn and sort of go through this together. I think it will take a lot to sort of shift and reshape the way we think about a system, but it only starts through individuals in all of the organizations that we work in, and continuing to connect in venues like this, and hopefully more in person. So please do come join us if you're around this afternoon. We also welcome thoughts, feedback, ideas of what you would like to see this be in the future. So as those come to you over the next couple of days, please don't hesitate to reach out, or at any time further down the road. And then I think we have 5 minutes left, so we'll let you go early, or if folks have questions from today that have come up, we would love to hear those now or in the chat. And we hope to hear hear from you, see you soon. So
Thanks, everybody.
thanks.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks all.
No questions. Everyone was ready to go. That was the fastest leave I've ever seen. All right. Well, we held space for it, so yeah, that's important.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, well done, team. Timing, my goodness.
Thank you,
Stop
David.
the recording. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, David.